I'm going to be doing a base layer in watercolor, and then I'm going to be using my watercolor pencils on top of that. So you can get the reference photo over at my website. Link is in the video description. This is the Fabriano Artistico Extra White Hot Press 300-pound watercolor paper. Now, I don't buy Fabriano anymore. They completely changed the way the paper is. This is something old that I had from the past, so that is why I'm going with this one. I did not pre-stretch this because it's 300 pounds. For the base layer, I am using the Schmincke. I've got these little tubes here. That is not the color I'm using, but I've already put some out. This little ceramic palette. This is so nice for watercolor. If you're using the tubes like that and you have to mix your colors, super handy. Normally when I work in watercolor, what I do is keep these little mason jars and it's distilled water. That is important, and I just change it out with distilled water. You want to use distilled water, not tap water. Tap water has so much crap in it, it can actually cause colors that are light pass, cut paper that is good and archival to yellow to cause, like, you don't want tap water. You want to go with distilled water. It's not super expensive. You can get a gallon of it for $1 or less at most stores. So what I'm going to do, I've got to re-wet. This is like completely dry in here. This is, I mean, we're talking, I probably last used that color a year ago. So I'm going to go ahead and wet that. It's going to need a decent amount of water. Now, I say a decent amount of water, but I don't want this to be super thin because of time constraints on the live stream. I don't have time to build this up in multiple layers. I'm going to be slopping this on there pretty fast. So I am using, this is a number 10 round Mimic Creative Mark brush. I really like these brushes. We're going to go with this dark teal color. And the first thing I need to do is just outline my seahorse. This is a really greenish blue color. Now, this is one of the things that I like better about watercolor than ink tints. Sometimes, not always. But I mean, I guess it depends on what I am trying to accomplish. But I like that right now I'm not using great techniques. It's kind of running, kind of blotchy. I can come and smooth this out and reactivate it later, and it is not even going to matter. I'm going to go ahead and fill this in. I would like a little bit more blue in this, I think, though. So let me get that. Now, one of the things you're going to notice as I work, the paint starts to build up and pool down here. That is because I am working upright. Usually when you work in watercolor, working flat is going to give you better results. In my case, because of my back and my neck, that's not really possible. And here's the thing. Sometimes we think of mediums, like, let's say, I know some of you guys are, I've heard from some of you that you're colorblind. You may see things a bit different than someone else. It may give you different results, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. So let's say we'll use the watercolor as an example. Yeah, there we go. Get some of that blue in there. With the watercolor as an example, I can't work flat. My results are going to be different. The way that this starts to run and hit at the bottom, whatever, that's my style. I mean, in one sense, my bad technique there is almost giving me something that's a bit more unique. Don't feel like, because like if you do have a physical limitation like I do, don't feel like you can't do something as well as somebody else. Just because your results are different, it doesn't mean you can't make something that's super pretty. Oh yeah, I really like this color. Less of the green. We'll just let that fade into the green. Such a pretty color. And I think someone had asked, do I keep my frogs in my art room? I do, but they're the dart frogs and their tank is very enclosed. So the paint fumes don't really get in there so much. There's not really good air circulation there. But I mean, I've oil painted in here and they've always been fine. I oil painted back when I used to have a White's tree frog 25 years ago, and I had him for 12 years and he was in the same room. I didn't realize, like, it didn't even cross my mind at the time I should be concerned, but he was fine as well. So yeah, I think that you should, I mean, try to ventilate it as well as possible, but the frogs haven't been overly sensitive. Like, but my canary, I would never bring, even when everything's dry, I wouldn't even bring my canary in here. They're so sensitive. But the frogs have been fine. But I mean, that's one of those things I think you need to make a judgment call on what you're comfortable with. And like I said, my dart frogs are in here. I don't know if I would want to oil paint with my tree frogs because they do get more air circulation in their tank than the dart frogs. So that would concern me a bit. But like I said, back years ago, before I had any idea, like when I was new, we tend to do things that or we might not do once we learn a bit more. My frogs were always fine. And I mean, that White's tree frog was 12. And a big, huge ask from you guys, please share this or any other video that you watch. YouTube's algorithm right now, I mentioned this last week, my subscriber count was way down. I used to average like 4,000 new subscribers a month. Now it's 270. 270. This is not sustainable. I don't know what's going on with YouTube, but I need your help. The best thing you can do to help me is to let other people know about if you follow along with a lesson that you enjoy, or if any of my videos you like, or any other artist. We all need your help. If you can share that, you can help us so much. And especially if you paint something and follow along with a lesson, if you can share the lesson that you took, like a link to that, when you share it on social media, that helps a lot. See how thick that was? That's because I did not have very much water mixed in. That's why it was so dark. Now, if I had more time on this, I might go through the trouble of using a masking fluid and mask out the seahorse so that I could just be pretty sloppy and messy as I filled in the background. But because the live streams, we do have a time limit there, I decided it'd be faster just to go ahead and paint around him. See how I want to pull that out? I don't want there to be a definite, like, heavy outline on that. So while the paint is still wet, I'm just going right up against the outline I have there. I miss the old Fabriano. This paper is nice to paint on. I wish they had not changed the way they make the paper. They claim they didn't change it, but anyone who's used it's like, yeah, it changed when you started printing money. Just want to take a little bit more time around that edge. Smooth his little snoot out. See, while that's still wet, see how I keep reworking these areas just to soften it out. Now, I'm okay. I actually want there to be some brush strokes, some blotchiness to it is what I'm going for. But I don't want that definite outline where you can see that I outlined the subject. That always looks a little bit weird. So that's what you see me spending a little bit more time working out. Like right here where it's building up because of me working upright, I've got to pull that up. Just stick my finger in there and dab that. See how I work in smaller sections? I'm not just outlining the entire subject and then filling it in. And the reason for that is I want to blend it while it's still wet. And it's watercolor. We can obviously reactivate that if we need to, but why make my life, harder than it needs to be? Let's get all of that in there, just doing section by section. My goal is to only need to do one layer on the background so that we're not spending all night filling this in. So it'll be a little bit lighter. If you're going to bid on this guy, this teal is going to be a softer, lighter color, much more watercolor looking than the one you see than my reference sample. Okay, now I'm going to take some water and a paper towel. Actually, let's rinse this brush. But I'm going to take my paper towel and I'm going to get that wet. And I'm just going to dab a little bit on here. Let's lift a bit off just to get some texture, because I don't want a perfectly smooth one shade type look. There we go. That's what I want. This one's a little bit too paper towel looking. I've got to go right up to the seahorse so that, again, we don't end up with that definite outline. If I don't, we'll have one smooth area around his body and none. It won't blend nicely into the rest. Now, for those of you, if you are working in Inktense, this step is not going to quite do it for you because that's not going to lift like this. And that's not to say that's a bad thing, it's just a different thing. It's one of the biggest differences between the mediums. Now you can, if you're using the watercolor pencils, you could have done the same thing. You're just going to shade it in with watercolor first. It's just, or the pencils, it just takes longer. So for such a large area, time-wise, now I want to go ahead and switch to my pencils. So the pencils I'm going to use tonight, I have 3 of the watercolor pencils that all 3 I like. I have Derwent, least light fast of the bunch, but I actually really like working with them. So if you're looking for something for a sketchbook, you just want to experiment, see if you like it, I really, really do like, I mean, like, performance-wise, one of the top, for me anyway, is the Derwent watercolor pencils. I also have the Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelle and the Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer. They're both wonderful. The Faber-Castell Albrecht Dürer, some of the blues, I was having a hard time getting dark enough, and then the Caran d'Ache Luminance, or not Caran d'Ache Luminance, Caran d'Ache Museum Aquarelles, I had a little bit of trouble with some of the purples getting it dark enough. So, you know, all of these brands have some pros and cons. The Faber-Castell, I believe they are supposed to be quite light fast. The Caran d'Ache are mostly too, and they're all marked on the pencils, so it's pretty easy to see. And I'll show you, I've got this really nice wood case. Caran d'Ache, back when the economy was a bit better. Now I'm over here budgeting like crazy. So if you too are budgeting like crazy, you do not need to get this wood case. The pencils are awesome. They have a 40 set. That's what I believe I linked in the description. They are really nice. Even with 40, you're going to be able to do anything you want with them. These mix beautifully, so I don't want you to feel like you have to get this big, huge, I mean, the wood box is nice, but if I were to buy it today, I wouldn't be able to afford it, in all honesty. So that is going to certainly, well, maybe if I stopped buying coral and treats for my canary, maybe then I could afford it. But this wood case, let me see if I can make it so you can see it a bit better. It's this beautiful wood. I know you can't see that much, but it's this beautiful wood. We'll flip it open. You've got your pencils in there. This is going to be a little bit of a pain to, wait, you can kind of see that way. This is not practical at all. But anyway, you've got 3 trays, I believe, and all of these trays are that wood. Is it 3 or 4? 3. And I'm apparently missing a color in there. But they're super nice. And then these ones, I believe, are marked on the pencil. Yeah, if it's a 5-star or 2-star, whatever. To stay with 5s, 4s, and 3s. If I come across a pencil that is a 2 or a 1, that I'm not going to go with. These are the colors that I have pulled out so far. Now, I don't want to jump to the black. The black I'm going to hold till the very end if I need any touch-ups and such. I don't want to just jump in, because if I start mixing that with red, now to be fair, red and black, you're just going to get kind of a brick red color. So it's not the end of the world if those 2 colors mix together. Unlike if I were using oranges and a lot of yellows, if black mixes in with that, you get this ugly greenish, like kind of looks like, actually, my shirt, this part of the shirt. You get this really like olivey, ugly, muddy. If that's not what you're looking for, you want to avoid the black with those colors. I typically will go with purples. Let's start with the lighter colors. When you're working with watercolor, we want to start with the lightest color and then work our way darker. So don't jump into going crazy dark from the beginning. I'm just going to lightly put in our grays here, and the blue that's on his snoot, great. I want that teal to blend in so that I end up with a, I want him to feel like he's a part of this background, because the reference photo did not have this background. It was just like brown and gray. So we want to make sure to pull some of that teal in so that he feels like he's a part of the scene. Now this guy has a lot of white little spots and such. I'm going to be doing that with my Doc Martens Bleed Proof White is what I will be painting the white on, because it would just take me forever if I sat there and used my masking fluid to mask out all those white dots. If I was working larger, then I would likely take the time and do that. But in this case, I am just going to keep it simple, and we'll just paint the white dots on top. So I'm just coloring this in. These are so soft. They're so nice to work with. Huge, huge fan of watercolor pencils. And if you've been hesitant to try watercolor because you found them to be difficult in the past, watercolor pencils were kind of my gateway pencil, I guess you could say, gateway to watercolor. Because once I got comfortable with these, once I was ready to start watercolor, watercolor didn't feel so scary to me anymore. So if you've been afraid in the past, you may want to, and I would just say pick up a few. I wouldn't go out and buy the big, huge set. I would just get a few and see if you like working with them. You could even get like black, white, gray, just a couple colors, whatever you want in between that. I say black, white, and gray. Don't buy gray. Just get black and white. You can mix your gray. But just a few in there to give it a try and see if it's something that you enjoy. Now, I've used watercolor pencils from like Prang. Not the same animal at all. Like, they were not fun. I did not enjoy that. And I think that was one of the reasons early on I didn't love watercolor in general that much. I had used Prang. I had used these cheapy watercolors that were not pigmented, and they just didn't, like, I couldn't build up my color where I wanted. They were just all around kind of frustrating. Using quality materials will make a big, big difference. So if you wanted to get started with watercolor pencils, grab either, like I said, Derwent's probably the cheapest, but not as light fast. So keep that in mind. But they were very enjoyable to paint with. Faber-Castell and the Caran d'Ache. You can't go wrong with any of those as far as enjoyable levels. Now, I don't care if these are exact to the reference photo. I just want to get some variation. My general lights and darks where they are the same as the photo had. Most of this tail you're really not going to see. That all gets covered by the matte. Although I probably will come through and add teal in there a little bit later, just so that, because being a little bit picky about that, even though it's not necessary because you're not going to see it, I just want to fill in all the way to the edge because that is me. So I apologize. This is really, actually, let me see if you can see better over here. I want you to see where my peach is. Kind of. You can see where I'm just shading lightly around here, getting some of that peach in there. But unfortunately, that was not showing, and again, sorry for that. So we've got this red. And I think the most important thing on this specific seahorse is that we get some variation. We don't want it all one solid red. We want it to fade. We want some peach and pink. We've got that gray we did earlier that is unfortunately not showing up for you. Maybe once I fill more of this in, I'll be able to adjust it so you can see it better, but I don't think if I adjust the cameras right now, it'll make a big difference. I'm gonna pull before I get too far. I want to get some of this lavender. I have a feeling this isn't going to show at all either, so I apologize. This one is probably heather. Is that what they call it? Nope, this is manganese violet. It doesn't look super saturated, but it's going to once I add water. And I am not pushing very hard. I would rather build this in lots of light layers so I don't damage the teeth of the paper. One of the things I would definitely recommend is do not, when you get this wet, dry it all the way before you go back over it with your pencil. If you put the pencil in an area that's slightly wet, yeah, it'll come out super dark, but you can't, like it almost is chunky, like a chunk stays on there, it doesn't blend out right all the way. It does. I tried that once and it was a bad, I tried it once for a reason. It didn't really damage the paper so much because I didn't push hard, but I wasn't able to ever fully blend that spot out. Okay, let's get some red again. And a lot of this I'll come back with some black to do shading, but I'm gonna blend this first before I do that. See, I can be really sloppy. I'm not really worried about which direction my pencils are moving in. Not that you can see that. This is so much darker than what you were seeing. Oh, I hate that. Let me show you again so you can get a better idea. You can see, oh, that's out of focus. You can see that it's a lot darker. It's even darker than what I'm seeing on camera there. These colors are pretty well pigmented. I mean, not pigmented enough where I would leave it as it is, but yeah. Okay, let's pull some more reds. The main thing here, just get some variation. You want multiple colors here, or even if it's not multiple colors, multiple areas of values where some's really dark, some's really light. That is more important. And I'm not worried about where those white spots are going to be. We'll be pulling that back in. This is going to need to be teal in here, so I'll pull some of that background color when I fill this bottom section in. Okay, I'm going to pull now my my purplish red. Let's get some more, kind of a, well, purplish red color. This one doesn't come out as much. It's almost like some of the colors I find to be, they almost feel more clay-like or kind of sticky, like you can feel them really grippy. That's the word I'm looking for. They're really grippy in the paper. This is not one of them, and that was one of the problems that I had with the purple I had used. I may switch over to my Faber-Castell for some of this, but the purple just didn't grip to the paper at all. Like, I mean, I did so many layers. It was for an anemone, or on the clownfish and anemone one I did years ago, and with these specific pencils. And that purple was nothing I did got it as dark as what I wanted it to be. You can see right now everything is super basic looking. That is totally fine. Oops, that should be red here. See, this red has that much more grippy, like it really is much more pigmented, unfortunately, than what you're seeing on camera, but it shows. That purple, not really. Do I have, I do, I could, yeah, this will probably be fine. I'll probably just depend on this red a bit more, which works well with that teal color, so I guess I shouldn't complain. It's like here, this would be more of a purple color on the reference photo, but the purple is just not pigmented enough, so I'm going to pull red instead. The values matter so much, so much more than your colors. Get your darks dark enough, your lights light enough, and your work will look good. If you use the perfect color, but your values are off, it's not going to look realistic. If your goal is realism, then your values are your focus, not the color. So I'm just going to add water. And see how like that is significantly darker. Go all the way up to those edges. Oh, I like that French gray. Oh, that's a gorgeous pencil. It blended really nice. And look at that red. Look how bold that gets. So I would recommend to have a scratch piece of paper, because if you're not sure how dark something's going to get when you add water, that can be a little scary when you're working with these watercolor pencils. So a test on a piece of paper can definitely make your life a lot easier. Oh, look at that saturation. That is perfect. Oh, and with how dark this is, when I come back on with, it's a little bit more red in person. That looks a little orangey. I may have to adjust the saturation or the temperature there. But when I come on top with the white, with this being so color saturated, those spots are going to stand out so much. Now, the other thing, I am not going to try to smooth out all of the brush strokes. I want this to be a little bit blotchy, because that's just detail without having to actually put the trouble into detail. See, look at how it's blotchy. Leave it blotchy like that. And this is way more red. Leave it blotchy. And by blotchy, see how I'm switching direction of the pencil, or the brush. Also, see how that's running? That's too much water. Spread that out, or lift some with a paper towel. That is a dangerous thing to have happen when you're working upright at an easel, because if that runs into my background, I have to try to hide it with something. And then we've got most of this tail is going to be off screen, or, well, it'll be cut off by the mat. I always say off screen. It's not really the right word. Okay, next I am going to come back over, I'm going to grab my blue, my palette here. I'm going to reload a little bit of color. I'm just going to pull some in, because that is part of the fin that is translucent. So I want the background showing through. Now, if you look at the reference photo, that is like a grayish brown color. Yeah, because that's what color the background was. But in mine, I need to change that so it looks translucent. It needs to be the color of the background. And I'm going to start pulling a little bit of this teal, not much, a little bit. It's a little too much there. Too much again. Learn your lesson. There we go. If I go too dark, I'm not worried about it because I am going to be coming back on this with white. Now here, I don't want to go crazy. Just a little bit of, wipe some off there on the tape here so it's not going to go too insane. Oop, too much wiping it off. There we go. We're going to come around some of these edges. Now, why am I using teal instead of black or some other color for a shadow? Because the background was teal. I want to pull in, again, this reference photo that I use. What I have on my website does have, I think I did put the one where I edited it to this background, but the actual reference photo, he was against brown and gray rocks. I probably should have uploaded that. Anyway, the thing with that is, that's why the reference photo, it has so much of that grayish tone, and I'm not using that. I'll fill that in just so that I've got it even. Let that fade out into my background. There we go. We've got a shadow in here. Let's get some of this built in now with this, and I'm going to come back to my pencils. And you can do this with your pencils too. You don't have to do this with the teal. It's just that it's easier because I have it out. Some darker spots up here and a shadow. Again, I want that shadow to stay with the teal in my case, whatever your background color is. Let's say you did purple. You would want your background to have more of the purple in that case. And then again, let me show you really quick what the color is looking like so far. So it still looks a little orangey, and I'm not sure if that's my monitor or what you guys are seeing, but mine's more of a pinky red color. Like, it looks like a red Otter Pop. That is the color. So let's go back to doing some shading. Get that a little bit darker. I'm going to start building up more and more contrast. Remember, it's always easier, or not easier, safer to go too light and have to come back and darken it up than to go too dark. And that can be true to an extent with most medium, well, some mediums, it doesn't really matter, but it is especially true with watercolor. Some little lines here for that fin. And he's also got some spikes coming through in front of that fin. He is a spiky fellow. I think I'm going to change some of these. I'll use the red. I'm not putting much pressure here so that I keep that really light. And I'm still going to come back through with the black, but if I can shade it with this right now, it'll make him feel a part of that background better. How many of you watching have fish tanks? And if you do, what do you have? Spikes are going to come all the way up through here, so we'll just give that hint of where those go. Some little detailing, and of course the shadow under his chin. Okay, I'm going to dry that, and I'm going to come back through and start darkening some stuff up, lightening other things up. I am liking where this guy is going. He's going to be super cute. Oh, hold on one second. That's a good question. Denise said, I use distilled water for acrylics also? No, I don't find that acrylics need it. They're not super sensitive. It's anytime I'm working on paper, that's when I go with distilled. Yeah, a little bit. This is the aubergine. Now you don't have to blend everything out with water. You can see this looks beautiful just as it is. now that I've got the base layer. I always blend the base layers though. You may be tempted just to push harder to get more color pigment. If you push harder, it is not going to blend well. I am going to end up blending some of this out though with the water. This is when we start building up those values. Very, very important. Like right now, it's just this weird flat looking cartoon. Not cute, doesn't look realistic. You can do this in many layers. Just keep a light hand. Don't push hard. So you can pull some of the yellows in here, right around his face. We're going to pull that down just a bit. And down here, just a bit. When you are not watching art videos or art lessons, let me know. Do you listen to audiobooks? Do you watch like Netflix while you're working, or music? Or do you like silence? I'm typically an audiobook fan myself. If you do listen to audiobooks, what type of books do you listen to? See, like right here, this on the picture would be more black. I'm using the, what is this, aubergine? And it doesn't matter. I only care that it's dark. I don't care if it's the exact same color. It absolutely does not need to be. Is it dark? That's what I care about. Let's see how we're really getting a lot of variation now in all of these values. You just sharpen these in a normal, like the Coom metal sharpener I use for everything else. There is a lot of paint on my hands. How did I manage to make that big of a mess? I'm usually not that messy. You know, actually, besides here, I think I'm going to play it safe and blend this before I start in with too much of the black. That way I'm not making too much of a muddy mess. I'm going to start with the red where I had put it earlier. You don't need a lot of water on your brush, especially at this stage where we've already blended it. I'm just softening some of this out. So again, let it be blotchy. I'm not trying to smooth out all those brush strokes. Too smooth looks plasticky. I want that watercolor look. Well, some people would say they don't want that look with watercolor. I like it. So that's what I'm going for there. Now I can go ahead and blend the black area. See how dark that gets? That's why you want to be really careful. If you are new to a medium and something happens and you go way too dark and you don't know how to fix it, don't stress out about it. That's part of the learning process. We tend to worry so much about messing up that we don't learn very fast because we're too afraid to mess up. You need to make those mistakes so you know what not to do when you get further along, where you've had a lot of experience, where you're starting to take things, you know, you've had that, you've had the practice, so now it's time to start being serious about it. You need to have made mistakes so that if that happens, you know either one, how to avoid it, two, how to fix it. Don't be so worried in the beginning of messing something up. Mess it up. That is a part of the learning process. I'm going to go ahead and dry this. Come through and start really darkening some of these areas up. And I can darken some too with the pencil, with the aubergine. Is that aubergine? No, you're purplish red. You weren't dark enough. You sit down. I'm going to be using a combination of aubergine and the black. And I'll be coming back through with white, and that's going to make a difference too. And actually, some of the white I can do now where I'm lightening up an entire section. And so this is the white, just a normal white pencil. For the areas with the spots, the dots, those you can see, but they're not super bright. So when I want them to be super bright, I'm going to switch over and paint that with that PH Martin Docs something or another. Bleed proof white. Link is in the description if I did my job right. Very good chance I did not do my job right though. I think if I want a softer white, I can go with this. Again, I will harshen anything up I need to with that other one. It's like these lines in here, these can be a little, some of them can be softer, so I can get this nice soft look first, and then I can sharpen up what I need to later. Let's see, you've got a whole patterny thing over here that's just kind of a weird mess. These are not wiggle worms. You are going to be tempted, I know because I am, to draw wiggle worms. We don't want wiggle worms all over. Look at the shape, how defined they are, and what direction these lines go. No wiggles. This is not a confetti seahorse. And while I'm not trying to make the lines exactly like the reference photo, it doesn't need to be exact, I need to be semi-close. Pretend we know what we're doing. And some of these I'll pull out these nice bright areas. It's gonna look so good. I'm excited. I can't wait to get those details on there. And see how this mostly lightens it? It doesn't bring it to white white. Kind of like putting white colored pencil over other layers of pencil. It's like putting that over the yellow just made the yellow lighter. Whoops, that's the wrong button. There we go. Okay, let's come through with some of these darker values now. Just look at your reference photo. Look at some of those shapes in there. Just copy what you see. And once I put the white on, I can come back through and make the in-between spots even more bold if I need to, which is very likely, but we'll see. See, I'm doing these little circles, starting to create that texture. You don't need exact to the photo. You just want to start going with close. And the other thing is, notice that I'm not just filling it in solid. See how I'm leaving some of these light areas showing through, these lighter pink spots. Variation is key here. And it kind of looks like little scribbles. They're like intentional scribbles. This whole area here is going to get a lot darker. And I am starting to put a little more pressure with these pencils because I don't plan to blend again with the water. So now I'm pretty safe to go ahead and push harder. Although, when I get it this hard, when I go to paint with the Doc Martens PH whatever, bleed proof white, that will mix in if I've got a lot of areas that are really thick like this where I have not blended out, that the white will mix. Itchy Wade, stop chewing. I know grass makes you itch. See how, look at the texture I'm getting here. And this, I'm gonna have to pull over here for you guys to see because it is looking really good and not so great on that camera. But I'm getting a lot of that texture now. All of these little sections in here. And little circly guys. Dots are our friends as always. I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the black and start defining some stuff in here. Now notice that my hand is resting over here. That's actually how, that makes sense why I got so much paint on my hands, is because I forgot I had painted that. But that is where I'm resting my hand. If I didn't have that there, I would use glassine under my hand. Get this little bit of gray right under. I think that French gray is my favorite color tonight. I love how that came out. We have almost like little stripes in some of these spikes. And I would rather see you have things too much contrast, too dark and too light, than too mid-range and boring. Get that variation in there. I've told this story multiple times, but there was a pet portrait artist who was on, when I was doing pet portraits on an Italian Greyhound group, and her work was so detailed, but it didn't get the attention, even though it was so detailed and so realistic, but it was everything was mid-range. It was very boring. She did not get anywhere near the commissions that the other pet portrait artists who were on that forum were getting. Get that contrast up. It will make such a difference to the viewer. We often think that the viewer is going to notice that level of detail and think it looks more realistic because of it, or they'll like it better. That's really not what grabs the eye. You have to remember that most of your buyers don't know what they're looking at. They look at it and go, oh, that's pretty. It's usually because it stands out. Hype up your contrast. I'm going to switch back to the purple color, aubergine. Actually, I need to sharpen that a little bit. Pull some little spots in here. Same thing, I want to get some of these dark areas a lot darker. Actually, I think I'm about ready to start with the bleed-proof white and then come back in between those spots to hype that up. So what I am going to do now, I'm not blending that black. I don't want it to be like, it would be too harsh. So I've got my Doc Martens bleed-proof white, Dr. P.H. Martens bleed-proof white. There is a lot of paint on my hands. Now this, it is like completely dried in there, and it came to me that way. And I was reading reviews, and somebody said you were not supposed to mix water in with this. It worked fine. That's what I've been doing, and it works fine. So I am going to do the same now. And again, maybe that's not how it's supposed to come. Let me know if you've used this. Was yours hard as a rock like this? It works though. Like, I was perfectly happy with it. So this one time, I've got a Simply Simmons, just a round number 4. I'm going to go ahead and use that for what I'm doing here. And the link for everything that I'm using is in the video description. And those are affiliate links, so if you make a purchase through that, you help me out a bit. Kelsey said she always mixes hers with water. See, and I don't know, whatever I read that, it's been a while. Whatever I read that on, I'm like, I wasn't sure if that was true or not. I like how that stands out so much. Now I need some highlights over here, but I want those to be softer, so I'm going to hold off and do that with the, actually I don't even have to hold off. What am I talking about? It's not wet. Do that now. Grab the pencil. So see how that gives me that nice soft look, whereas when I'm painting with that pH neutral, words are hard. When I'm painting, we're just going to call it the white. When I'm painting with that, it's like thick, it's not translucent, so it doesn't have your watercolor look. It is extremely thick. I've had people ask if they could just use the Inktense white. I'm sure that would work as well. I am a huge fan of dots, especially when I'm doing marine life. These all sort of fan out. And I do have the white watercolor. I know that's kind of backwards. Some people are don't use white with watercolor, and I understand why, because it just does give a different look, but also this is giving me the end result that I want, so there we go. But like with the actual watercolor, I have that, but it is not nearly as opaque as this, even the ones that are supposed to be more opaque. This is definitely, like, if you're looking for opaque, this is the go-to stuff. If you use a different white with watercolor, let me know what your favorite is. No, don't just put random polka dots everywhere. There's a bit of a, like, copy the shapes that you're seeing. I will say this is not my favorite smell. Is this what? Yeah, it's real. No, actually, I think it's, never mind. It's not the white. It's the water from whatever blue I'd used before. It just smells terrible. Can you use gouache? Absolutely. Gouache is just an opaque watercolor, so that would definitely work. If you've got that, that would work really well. See, I stuck my finger in that. I dabbed it and I made but those bigger ones, little teeny ones, by letting my finger move the paint. So some of it stuck to my finger there, and so it kind of worked like a paintbrush to apply it or move it into other locations. Now what happens if I go too white and I regret it? Put pencil back over it. No big deal. I mean, I would rather go too little and have to add more just to make my life easier and everything to go faster, but just don't be afraid to mess up, so that you're afraid. Like, it's very common when I work with students to see them so afraid to mess up that they don't try things. They're like, they don't progress because they're too afraid of making a mistake. Go make that mistake. You're learning. It's fine. Go paint some things that are ugly. That is normal when you're learning. That would work too. Golden's High Flow Acrylic White. Yeah, you could certainly. That makes sense. I'm liking this brush for the spots. The Simply Simmons is just like, has just enough firmness. Of course, we'll paint some bubbles in there, because no marine life of mine is complete without bubbles. I'm just continuously looking at that reference photo. And even if I don't copy something exactly, I just pick one little spot and go, okay, it looks like there's some spots in there. Paint them in. Oftentimes you'll look at something and think that it looks too detailed, like it's going to take too long, it's going to be too hard. The things that have more detail are easier to make look good. You can see me covering a bunch of stuff with dots. I can hide anything with these dots right now. If something didn't come out right, throw a dot over it. No one's going to know the difference. It is much easier to make busy things look good than very basic things. Again, I'm going to come through and darken a few of these areas up in between the white spots, because sometimes the white spots, as bright as they are, they won't feel bright enough. And it's not because they're not, I mean, they're as white as they're going to go. It's because what's next to it isn't dark enough yet. Notice the difference in size in some of these as well. We don't want them all just polka dots splattered everywhere. Oh, he's got nice texture. I am loving this guy. And take your time. Don't feel like you have to keep up with me. If you want to work slower and just pause the video, that is totally fine. Remember, when it comes to speed, being faster doesn't mean you're better. It's completely up to the individual artist. Some artists just work really slow, and there is nothing wrong with that. Don't feel like you're not as good because of it. That's normal, and especially if you're newer, it is very normal to be slow in the beginning. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and paint now too. I'm going to use the white, and I'm going to paint, I think I'm just going to use white though. Yes, I am going to use white, and I'll go over it with some of the blue or French gray. So we've got the little stick guy. Gregorian, I can never get that right. Sea fan. We're going to go with sea fan. It's easy to say. Pretty sure that's what we have going on here. And again, some of this is going to get cut off by the mat. I'm just going bigger because I would rather fill in too much than not have enough. Give him all of his little floofs. Remember, the harder you push, the thicker your line is going to be. We've got floofs on both sides of that little stem. See, right now this is just too white, but when I come on top of that with my pencil and darken a bunch of this up, it will look great. Remember too, when you're learning, let's say you paint something and it comes out totally ugly. You don't have to post it online. I think we've gotten to this idea with social media that we have to post everything we do like it's some sort of confession. Like, oh, here's the ugly thing I painted. You're fine, don't share it. When I first started painting, there was no social media. I didn't have that pressure that I think a lot of people have now that they have to show. You don't have to show it. You're gonna have some ugly stuff. That is okay. Trust me, I don't show my sketchbook for a reason. There are some ugly things in there where I'm just kind of experimenting. Not that I use the sketchbook too often. I should use it more. I just never do. But don't feel like everything you do needs to go on the internet. Paint some things with the intent of never showing anybody. I think that that's really important too. I've known of several people, I'm going to put some dots right around the edge of this. I know several people who were taking my class, and I remember one lady, she had come and her husband saw what she was doing and was like, oh, that's not very good. And she's like, you think so? You don't think he was like, yeah, it's easy. I could do it. So she sat down and painted with him one night. He never gave her crap again. But sometimes our families can be super harsh and think we're wasting time, wasting money, whatever. And it's like, that's a normal part of the process of learning to paint. Anyone can learn to paint if you put the effort into it, the time. It's just that not everyone does. But we all start out painting some really questionable, really ugly things. That is normal when you're learning to paint. I'm going to dry this. Stay on electricity. Softer dots out. And I'm also going to start darkening some stuff up, and he will be done. I'm going to let that set for just a moment. I want to darken some of that up, but let's go on the seahorse himself where I know that that is dry. I'm pushing really hard at this point. I am burnishing the heck out of this. Jamming that pencil into the paper. You can see the pencils are pretty strong. I say that and it's probably going to snap, but they're overall generally pretty strong. I mean, we're not dealing with Prismacolor level weakness, like will snap because the wind blew 3 cities over. I'm doing a lot of dots, just build that texture. This guy is definitely going to end up being one of our Patreon postcards. He's going to print beautifully, I can tell. See how I'm just working on those values? These are the final details. What needs to be lighter, what needs to be darker. See, and I'm not just filling in solid scribbling all over. I'm doing a bunch of these little dots. And all of these little details I'm doing will add up to making a big difference in the end. It doesn't seem like much. It seems like I'm just randomly moving the pencil all over, but it all comes together slowly in the end. I'm loving that contrast with the black there. I think it almost looks like this photo was taken with a flash or something. Like it's got some weird harshness on the shadows, but I love it. I mean, not that I would recommend using a flash on fish. I doubt this guy wanted to be blinded. Would explain the expression on his face though, wouldn't it? Reminds me of being at the aquarium and there was an octopus I was trying to photograph and he was out and he's moving around and the idiots next to me ignored. There's this huge sign, no flash photography. What do? Take a flash. Octopus flips, freaks him out, he takes off. I couldn't get a photo because they decided to ignore the sign. Thanks, jerks. But what's worse is they freaked out the octopus. Don't scare an octopus. Pretty sure they're smarter than us. That is not a creature I want to upset. It's like making an African gray upset. They can figure out how to get revenge. Now notice that I'm not just going around and making an outline all the way around it. I don't want this to just look like an outline. It's got random areas that the shadows are deeper. I don't want to go that dark. We'll switch over to the French gray. There we go. See, much softer. And look how we built this up. I think that that is very important. When you looked at this in the beginning stages, it wasn't so cute. We had to add a lot of detail to get that texture, but by continuously working and adding that detail, it looked so much better. I want to get a few darker bits. I'm going to use that French gray. And I'm going to put the finished painting over my website as well, so you can use that as a reference as well. How many times can I say as well? Apparently a lot. I'm going to put that on there too because it definitely looks different to me than it is coming out on camera. So you can use both if you're going to follow along. Okay, I do want a teal color in there though. Let's see. Turquoise, perfect. Yeah, that's definitely going to make those a little bit better. Just add in a little bit in there. Okay, so bubbles. We do a sad face with the black pencil. And I want to stagger these moving up. Put these in a couple of locations. I've got to make sure that they are showing on through the mat though. Some of these may get chopped. Okay, looks like we're mostly in a good location. I'm going to hold this here while I fill that in. Okay, those are good. Now notice that I don't just put random polka dots everywhere. They sort of trail up. That gives you a nicer look. So we're going to do the black there, and I'm going to take my water and a brush, and I'm just going to smudge that down. I want the teal turquoise color in the background to show through. That is very important. I am not trying to remove it completely, so I don't want to over blend. That is really dark. I want to lift some of that. There we go. That is definitely a bit dark. I'm going to push some of that up. Much better. Same thing here. And the dart frogs are starting to sing. So if you hear something in the background, that's what it is. Okay, now we need to dry that. And I'm going to use my white pencil and come on the underside with this. This I don't need to blend out because that is coming out soft enough. Then we've got a highlight, which is not going to be bright enough. I'm going to go ahead and use that P.H. Martin, Dr. someone or another's. Clean that brush first. And I want to put a dot right at the bottom and then a little curve on the top. So here's where the light enters, dot for where it escapes. Ah, so cute, I love him. He's definitely one that is much, much better in person. I am not loving what this camera is doing to this.